Welcome to the Continuous Transformation Podcast, where spirit and science meet and creatively merge to give birth to the future. Disclaimer: high risk of life-transforming perspectives.
This is the best time to begin your continuous transformation process.
Your host is Adina, a visionary, influencer, and scientist with a quantum physics background and more than 30 years' experience of yoga, tantra, and meditation practice and teaching. In this episode, hear about what we can do when we meet with crisis in our love relationship. Is happily ever after really an option? Married couple and lifetime lovers Adina and Adina share insights into what it takes to succeed, and how to deal with the increased pressure on the relationship that comes with being forced to spend so much more time at home together.
Fundamentally, we are falling in love and we feel deeply attracted, especially from the heart level, by those people who provide us with the best way of learning about ourselves. Practically, we engage in relationships which are teaching how to complete our life experience. If we go in relationships in a conscious way, and if we go knowing what is a relationship and exploring all its possibilities, what will happen next is that we start to evolve. What we see through this repetition of the failed relationships is practically a repetition of a failed exam, like in the university. What happens? You are in the same exam now, like 2 years ago? Yeah, because I never passed it. We are lacking this learning dimension regarding relationships. Welcome, I am Adina, and today we will have a talk about what happens in our relationships and what is the impact of this crisis mentality about which I was talking previously in a previous podcast. We already spoke about the crisis mentality. And we've seen that this topic is present in our life almost everywhere today. We saw that we have a tendency, almost an appetite for drama and crisis because we need to feel alive. Also because we started to get numb out of certain habits that we have. And if you are curious about this crisis mentality, please go for that podcast, which is one of the previous ones. Now, in this time of the pandemic, or plandemic, as some people call it, for very good reasons, we were forced to remain home. And we were forced to remain together in some situations. Lovers or husband and wife who have been together for a while, now they are forced, they are pushed together, and that should, you would expect, result into sometimes even fixing some problems from home. Very often we hear people blaming the agitated life, the program that doesn't allow us to pay attention to each other, doesn't allow us to give each other time and the proper acknowledgement or the proper space. Yet now we were forced to be together, and statistics shows something very interesting. The rate of divorces in this year that have passed since we were forced more or less, but some periods of time to be in isolation, in many cases together. So this rate of divorce is increased instead of decreasing. And of course, the question is, was this the effect of isolation which generated such a situation? Or, and that's an interesting alternative, was it the already existing problem that just surfaced because we have more time to acknowledge it? Because we have time to pay attention, we were practically forced to pay attention to each other, and then we have acknowledged some things that we didn't know how to process. I've heard a lot of people, even friends, who were saying that in this period where they were together, forced together, so to speak, with someone they have been together for a while, they have discovered about each other things they couldn't process. Practically, we were given a time together, a time that we didn't know what to do with. And that is very important, in my opinion. That reveals something about this crisis that we are facing today, which is affecting our relationships. This fact alone, just like many chapters of our life, relationships, they show that they suffer from not knowing how relationships work. Now, we don't know where to put them in our calendar. We don't know where to put our relationships in the program of our life. And that was proven by the fact that even when we were given the central position of attention to relationships, they rarely were fixed by the isolation together, but mostly they were starting to show the problems without showing the solutions. Talking about this subject, which I think is very important, I invited today my lifetime guest, I would say. I invited today the lover and my wife, Adina.
Thank you. Thank you, Ava, for having me again in this podcast. And I dare say...
Who else I could have to talk about this topic?
Yes, this reminds me of a joke now, since you put it up. We went into a family reunion once. I went in a family reunion, and then they were just relatives with the wives. And the 5-year-old boy was introduced. This is your uncle John and his wife Mary. This is your aunt Camila and her husband, like that. And then at a certain point, arriving to one person who was alone, and he was introduced, and this is your uncle whoever, Peter. And then the boy was asked, it's true story, and who's his wife? And then the parents say, he doesn't have a wife. And then the boy, looking to Peter's uncle there, would say, if you don't have a wife, how do you know what to do? So it's like how not to have me for this subject. How would you know what to do?
What would I know what to say about
exactly
the topic?
About the couple relationship from another angle of the bed and from another side of the bed. And I dare say subject is, of course, lifetime journey that we have had together for 30 years of being in our relationship and 25 years of marriage with papers. And I don't know if there is these papers, if they add or not something to the crisis. That's an interesting question to start with. It looks like...
Before starting, I would like to remind our auditory the fact that Adina is a very enthusiastic yoga and tantra practitioner. She, as a formation, she's an engineer in technology of transportation, but then she shifted to yoga and tantra. She is also an inspiring teacher for entire generations of students on this fascinating journey of self-transformation. And she's the founder of the Education for Women in Discovering and Empowering Femininity, and the founder also of the program Women of Spirituality, a program that is now made available worldwide, and you are all welcome to discover it. So I just wanted to say, for those who see you for the first time, about yourself, and of course the most important realization, the fact that you chose to educate a person like me for now 30 years, and it seems like you did a good work according to some. What is the angle? What do you see in this topic that is moving you What connects you with this topic?
So first of all, I have two angles. One is the angle that relates very much with nowadays, exactly as you started, the fact that we are in lockdown and the fact that we are forced to stay together, I suppose is blocking an entire array of, creating relationships. If we are to think about the format of relationships nowadays, which is go out or club, drink, go home, sex, and goodbye, a lot of people probably are super depressed because this sequence.
The habits are disrupted.
Yes, very much. So I have this modern angle. What are these people that cannot follow their pattern? What are they doing? I suppose we need to take in consideration even the depression level and even the isolation level. Or what do? They just stay on social media and comment on, the elections and...
Of course, this is just a curiosity, but I wouldn't go into their privacy because that's not... I wouldn't be interested in that. But what I would be interested in exploring from this angle is the interruption of patterns. The fact that, for instance, these patterns, many of them, are defense mechanisms in order to avoid deepening the intimacy. And that is something that we have seen in this isolation. For us, for instance, the people around us didn't see that because our existence is not very much related to patterns. We are living spontaneous, on the flow. And for this reason, we could be together. Actually, we were in very many times in a lockdown, working together in the same room, practicing together, being together, loving together for years, not for a few months and so on. So we've been through that. But normally people, they build, because intimacy has this dissolving patterns property. Intimacy have this corrosive, in quotes, corrosive effect of dissolving the patterns of the ego. And because of that, people hide from real intimacy. If they are enthusiastic about real intimacy in the first few months of relationship, after that, they build protection from this corrosive effect, because otherwise they can't preserve their ego. Their ego dies, practically. And of course, not knowing that this is a beneficial effect, not knowing that the death of the ego means the birth of your soul, the rebirth of yourself, then, of course, they run away from it. And then instinctively, we run away by creating this, many times, social escapes. By the way, social eating. One of the big problems. I addressed it in one of the talks that we had in the podcast. There are what you mentioned there: go out, clubbing, drinking, going back home, having sex. Sometimes not even having sex with each other because you take someone else from the club. But who knows? You are so detached from your common reality due to the intoxicants that it's going wild. It's coming natural, and then next day you go along with your life. And then, of course, very often people are saying, well, if we would have more time, we will deepen. But actually, honestly, now they have more time. Many people who had more time, they realized, well, time was not the factor of happiness. Actually, we did have time, and now what time revealed was the flaws, the fact that we were running away from each other. So that's why, in a certain way, that will be very, I would say, revealing to see the fact that the disrupting process that happened, they couldn't go out. They couldn't go visiting. They couldn't do the usual defensive mechanisms. Defensive against what? Against deepening intimacy. They needed to let intimacy deepen, and they got scared. Because, of course, underneath that shell they built, there were a lot of tensions, there were a lot of things that they didn't even address. They didn't even acknowledge they exist. But of course, beneath those, it's a thin layer of problems and wrinkles on the relationship. Then they would have discovered the real, still alive relationship, little bit undeveloped, probably, little bit ignored, most probably, but still alive. And they would have started to grow it.
Ava, I have also another personal question, noted also now during this lockdown, but also in general. And I always wondered, when you would have an argument with a colleague, even if you would have an argument with somebody from the family or with some of your friends, one of your friends and so on, it hurts, of course, if there is disagreement, but it's kind of like you find the place inside of you to continue or to stand somehow. But when in a couple relationship, when we have any argument or something, I feel it as the most hurting things of all, the most hurting aggression or something, like something that would touch somebody. Why so? Why it's only me, or it's a general thing? I'm only the only one sensitive to that?
No.
Or it's a feminine thing?
What did you do when you felt like that?
I would ask my best friend normally, because it would be unbearable to hold it alone somehow.
Exactly. This is you see what people say or what people do in relationships, especially due to the intimacy, their soul intimacy, of course, is closer to them than, let's say, when you have a disagreement with your colleague in the office, as you gave this example. And of course, that hurts you more because you are closer when you are with your lover, when you are with a person who is so close to your soul. But the reason why it is so intense is also because it has the chance to transform you the most. Now, resisting the transformation is what is the drama. Because people, yes, it's exactly like you go to the doctor and you say, when I went to this friend of mine, he gave me an analgesic, and my tooth didn't hurt. Every time I go to the dentist, this is the most traumatic experience. So really, I don't want to go to my relationship with the dentist is very bad. Yes, but
it hurts me all the time.
It hurts you all the time, yeah. But actually, for your teeth is the most healthy relationship in that situation. So, of course, if you take the criteria, I just want to feel good, the friend who gives you an analgesic, yeah, is the best friend of yours, is the person you have a best comfortable relationship, while with the one who you love the most and in which you transform the most, in which relationship you transform the most, of course, that affects you the most. And if transformation you interpret as, it hurts and I don't want it like that, well, then that becomes something that is so deep and personal. But deep and personal is not bad, is not at all bad. Let's relate to an erotic example. A deep and personal penetration, it's good. It's good after a good foreplay. So it's not that bad. A superficial one is almost frustrating, even though it's like leaving you alone, so to speak. It leaves you, it doesn't bother you. But that's not the point in not being bothered. So that's an angle that we can speak about there. So yes, if a person comes to the conclusion, yes, in intimacy, of course,
you are the
more
most
difficult.
Exposed.
You're the most exposed. Intimacy is by definition supposed to expose us, because that is the reason why it has this corrosive effect to the ego, dissolving the barriers. The more intimate you feel, your soul feel intimate with your beloved, your heart is intimate, your body is intimate in intimacy, erotic intimacy, the more exposed you are. And yes, in this way you grow. The problem is that people don't want to grow. They don't even understand the possibility to outgrow their problems. And therefore, they get scared. There is a problem. Let's run. No, it's not to run away from. It's very simple to position yourself in such a way that you see it better. And then you outgrow the problem. You see what is the solution. You work together and you go beyond it. So that's
You anticipated my next question, because my next question is why in any other enterprise, let's put it like this, any other venture, we prove a lot of diligence, we prove resistance, endurance. But in couple relationships, there is this, it's kind of like a curse. At the smallest challenge, the feeling that we develop is, that's it, is the end. I cannot move a step further. It's so acute, this. While if it is happening in your job, you know, as I already said, you have a little argument with a colleague, you don't think to quit the job just because of that. You look for solutions. You ask help there. You do a lot of other things before considering to quit. But in couple relationships, there is this tendency at the smallest bump, let's quit and go find somebody else. Probably the other one is wrong, is not matching. And this will lead me to the next question I planned.
The idea here, which is very important, is the fact that we have this quitting mentality, running away mentality, because we don't know what to do. In many other domains of life, we are trained, we know what to expect. We know there is a solution. But in a relationship, we know so little that everything looks like a dead end. And you don't even know that, no, this is not a dead end. This is a crossroad. You just need to turn left or right. You'd go towards that and you see a wall. Yeah, because it's either left or right. There is no way forward. Sure, but when you have been around and you know the area, you know, I see the wall in front, it means it's either left or right. It's a crossroad. But for a person with zero experience, and most of the people today are launched in life with zero experience, and not only experience, you would say, is normal. You're young, but zero education. Zero education that then is going to very little simplified experience, and that is disastrous, because yes, the moment you encounter the first difficulty, you don't even know there is a solution. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I just see a problem that is magnified by all the emotions. Emotions have the effect of magnifying everything. And then, it becomes an insurmountable problem, a problem that can't be solved with a little experience and even less knowledge that you have about it. And that is one of the main things that we've noticed, you and me, in educating couples. And in our relationship, that's what happened in our 30 years of being together. How many times we saw the wall? How many times we saw that... Sorry, that's a wall. But then we realize, whoa. Actually, there is a choice. It's not a wall. The wall is just telling us you have to choose left or right. And then each choice was having consequences. We learn about it and then we explore some good exploration, some good experience of what not to explore. And in the end, the interesting conclusion was always that there is a way forward. There is a way, but not necessarily forward straight, mathematically. Sometimes it's left, sometimes it's right. And the point is that when you don't know, you don't have absolutely any clue. And that's the result of total lack of education in relationships, especially today. Not even understanding relationships are subjected to some very precise laws and mechanisms, and you can even transform the relationship in lots of ways. Then people are having this quitting mentality. But it's exactly like you see children sometimes playing with a toy or with a device, and they turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, and they say, that's enough. And they throw it away because there's nothing to do. But you know the toy, and there are so many buttons, there are so many things, but the child doesn't know. But if you show to the child, listen, little one, if you press this one, it does this. Oh, really? And if you press this one, it does that? Really? And then he plays another 3 months with that toy by pressing buttons and so on. But if you don't show anything, the child may be discovering 1 or 2 buttons, like almost accidentally, intuitively accidentally, and then that's it. And then he throws away practically unused. That's what happens with relationships. People throw away relationships virtually unused.
Now,
only 5 centimeters and the entrance.
Since you have made this comparison with press that button, I think we should consider a podcast about erogenous areas, because that's about how many buttons didn't we discover yet, or how many buttons, how many switches there are still to.
We can announce the listeners that we are discreetly planning our first podcast on eroticism. It's one of the first of its kind, where me and Adina will talk openly about the secrets of eroticism, the secrets of intimacy, and we'll take many of these topics, and you will be surprised how many buttons, are there. More buttons than in this German organon that they play in these old churches, with where the player plays with both hands and both feet.
And on many keys.
But the human being even have more.
So my next question would derive from this one: why we feel to give up at the first little bump on the road, and it got explained. And still, there are so many, and we have so many friends and students and couples we counseled and so on, who still quit, and then they met other people and create new couples which look exactly like the previous ones. So I wanted to ask, how come only for us we are so blind that we fall again and again in stereotypical relationships? We choose same kind of persons, even we said previously, oh, that was so difficult, I'm not going to do that ever again, or something, and still next time our friends who are not involved look and say, but he or she looks exactly like your ex, behaves like exactly like your ex, even
the same,
has same preferences like your ex. What in your head? You want to arrive in the same place. So is that a kind of a lesson not learned, or it is something we didn't
This is again the issue of looking from the right perspective, flipping the paradigm. Because you see, if we will look at the relationship as an opportunity to feel good, an opportunity to get laid, an opportunity to, people look into relationships in all kind of ways. Then, of course, it's very interesting, this repetition that we have. But fundamentally, we are falling in love and we feel deeply attracted, especially from the heart level, by those people who provide us with the best way of learning about ourselves. Practically, we engage in relationships which are teaching how to complete our life experience. Now, if we go in relationships in a conscious way, and if we go knowing what is a relationship and exploring all its possibilities, to give an example, if we learn how to make love and we make love together long enough so we assimilate the lovemaking experience, what will happen next is that we start to evolve. It's exactly like, for instance, a person who prefer to eat a certain kind of food and it says, I like this kind of food, I don't want anything else, and then they eat that kind of food. They go to visit, for instance, some friends, and the host asks, what would you like to eat? And they say exactly the same thing, of course, even there when they visit, same kind. But if you start to become aware of the savoring of that food, after a few weeks, you have enough. Enough in the sense, not that you reject it, but you will say, let's add now few spice of this. Let's put a few vegetable of that. Let's shift it to another kind of food, and so on. So in this way, what happens is that you start to evolve. So either this relationship turn into another kind of relationship, which is highly possible because you know how to morph it, and both lovers are transforming, and of course the relationship is morphing around them. Or we also have seen that a relationship fulfill its purpose. There is no more juice, so to speak. There is no more attraction. There's no drama. And then the two lovers, when they fall in love, you will see a totally different need, a totally different kind of lover, a totally different practically lesson, because they move on. So what we see through this repetition of the failed relationships is practically a repetition of a failed exam, like in the university. What happens? You are in the same exam now, like 2 years ago? Yeah, because I never passed it. So, of course, you don't promote to another level. But we are lacking completely this learning dimension regarding relationships. Relationships are an annex to life. They are viewed as a kind of a strange annex for pleasure or for comfort, emotional pleasure, sexual pleasure, whatever pleasures we put there, and fulfillments in an annex of life. And then we go there just when we need. We take what we need and we go out. Relationships are not part of our house. They are the garage. They are the tool annex of our life, which is dramatic.
There is also a little bit dangerous angle in the answer you gave, because making the parallel between savoring a food until you would like to savor something else induces this idea to give up something that you have tasted again and again and to move on, which appears very much.
That you got used with.
That you got used with, exactly. And appears very much this supermarket mentality somehow. Like we buy something and before it is, I don't know, used enough or something, we just throw it because a new product is out.
And then we move to the next shelf, and we buy another. But this is another thing. It's also the result of not deepening. This superficial, there is the type of relationship which we call it the one-day flower, the bee who flies from a flower to another flower, this model. Yes, it is also that, but this is because in that situation, we are not having the exercise, even the interest of deepening any experience in life. We stay at the surface. And because of that, yes, it appears that. But we should not be afraid to deepen a relationship because we are in danger of, what if we assimilate everything from it? First of all, by assimilating everything from one level, we deepen the level. And even if let's say we exhausted everything, hypothetically, both lovers feel the same. So it will not be the eternal, unnatural bondage that they created there. And you see sometimes people, when you go asking them privately, why you stay with him? we got used. We have a house. We have an arrangement. Come on, this can be disarranged. Can be can be solved administratively. It's like they hurt each other by holding this bond that is completely unnatural. But in this situation, they dissolve the bond naturally. It is consumed. It's gone, and they don't deepen anymore. But at least you know that. Or you don't acknowledge the consumption. Why? Because you're digging. You're still revealing deeper and deeper aspects of the same relationship. And yes, as we discovered, relationships are actually as limitless as our souls. So practically, you can deepen a relationship all the way to God, so to speak, to discover God in your relationship, because there is no finitude in that. But yes, sometimes people, their ego is stronger than their aspiration to remove the boundaries and so on. For some reasons, they decide, enough, that was it. Well, that was it, at least you know that. But there is also the deepening.
And there is also the fact that two people along the years, they also transform themselves. So there is always something new to discover in the other one, and something fascinating to share from your personal evolution, from your personal growth. And in this way, it's never like the same. It's always a new angle that can be added.
Yeah, nowadays, the whole idea that you mentioned is reduced to, in the case of women, to change their
style.
Yeah, their appearance. And in the case of men, little bit to change their appearance, and a lot to change the toys they play with. Yeah. Guys are very much into, I have a new car, I have a new laptop, I have a new like this. And girls are very much in having a new look, But the issue is, the new car with the new hair, they are not married. Still the two people are married. So they don't experience a deepening of their relationship. On the contrary, all these appearances that they shift, they are leaving them empty in the relationship. They leave the relationship completely barren. And that is a problem, of course.
And then I have another question, also coming from the experience of going along and observing so many couples and counseling and looking to ourselves. Even if you find someone truly wonderful, whom meets your, let's say, expectations, even surpasses the expectations, and you have this deep intuition that now is going to work, now is what we have looked for the entire life, and so on, and they are sweet with each other, they are faithful, they are not giving up at the first bump, and so on, and still, with the times passing, something installs there, kind of like they grew old into the relationship somehow. Something is missing, something, and even based on the best relationships, I want to say my question to the end. I was just seeing a Facebook post. I will not say names, but two colleagues we have had in our yoga school, boy and the girl, who met in the yoga school and fell in love with each other, and for some time came along on the spiritual path, and then they decided to make a family, and they just put it pictures with their kids celebrating 3 years old. And looking into them and knowing a little bit their story, I know that last time when they made love probably was when they made the kid, like 3 years ago. And they are kind of like looking and even going for counseling in what to do with this and what has happened and so on, and not finding a solution, and then kind of entering a phase, I will call it resignment, or this resignation somehow. And then they would just say, we love each other, And we are maybe too old to go and look for some other possibilities, and look how cozy house we bought, and we have this child to rise, and that's it. This is life for. And then they settle into that, and kind of even they are half age of us. I look at the pictures and I see already like old people there waiting what? Waiting to die, like going nowhere somehow. So
Anticipated the
crisis of purpose, a crisis of why are we still staying together, a crisis of meaning somehow in that.
Yeah, I know. I understand, and we talked a lot about these things, even between ourselves. So many times we analyzed this process of the flame starting to diminish, and in this respect, it's a combination of effects. The fact that we don't know about it is a very important effect, but also the fact that instead of deepening the love experiences, love-making experiences, deepening the intimacy in the couple relationship, people put, because the relationship itself and its fulfillment and intimacy is placed secondary, to say the least. It is placed there where practically is as I said, the dump, the toolbox of the house. Of course, that relationship doesn't grow. On the contrary, grows old. That's what happens with it, and doesn't develop at all. And then, of course, the solution is to introduce in the intimacy, in the way you are together, to introduce a transformative factor, a criteria of transformation. Like what helped us, for instance, the most was, interestingly, of course, we learned a lot from the tantric system. We learned all kind of elements about love and how to love actively and so on. But what helped immensely much and helped us to remain together was learning to practice different methods of transformation, and the fact that we were constantly emerging, each of us, above our personal problems. For me, it was always fascinating to see that you always prevailed all kind of inner crisis, and it was inspiring for me to be there next to you, to hold your hand, to see that you are well, because you make the effort that is what required from you in a feminine specific way. And I know that what was inspiring for you to keep you nearby and to help me was the fact that you knew you can count on me, that I will prevail, even though I was confronted sometimes in life with challenges, with difficulties and so on, inner difficulties, outer difficulties. You knew that I will not give up the inner transformation. And that is because every time you pass your tests in life, you grow and you are practically a renewed person. You renew the love, you renew the attraction, the passion, and so on. Another element that I think very often is ignored is the learned intimacy. I mean, how much in our relationship, for instance, it mattered the fact that instead of having a passion that was just consumed like that, we were exploring that passion, that we were exploring the passion like systematically, that we looked into it. You allowed me, with my masculine approach, to go there in the most intimate things. And even though you are shy, you transcend your shyness sometimes. Even though I was a little bit unexperienced, you taught me how to approach orgasm, approach different aspects of pleasure, foreplay, and all these elements that people do not explore. They take it almost, education of 5-year-olds. So in this way, of course, it's very hard for passion to remain. I mean, even erotic positions. People make love in 3 erotic positions. They practically have sex. They don't make love. They don't unite themselves in an uplifting erotic experience. They have a instinctual sex there, however. And then, of course, they return to their love relationship. And of course, after a while, they start to reject the disruption of their otherwise cozy, nice emotional experience, is this sex. Yes. And the woman mostly start to reject first, as we know, that you are much more endowed with knowing the pathway to eroticism, the pathway to fulfillment. And then, of course, guys are following, and usually they follow their frustration of their wife, of their lover. And after a while, they are the first one finding another lover around the relationship, but not in order to deepen the relationship, but exactly in this thing, let's do it again. Let's make it that first few months of natural excitement, of novelty. So yeah, plus of course we are very superficial, where we define everything that is interesting in life if it's new. That's something. We are so passive in finding novelty. People, they accept the news. They don't find the news. They don't find, for instance, a new angle on something you already know. Very rarely you see people doing that. Most of the time, people, if it's new, it has to be new, literally, informationally new. Like new name, new new address, that is new. But a new way to look at a person you know for 30 years, yeah. Who is doing that?
And one more question that comes refers to an observation again from so much experience. Many times we see very energetic and very decisive and strong woman somehow having a couple with a very feminine and quiet somehow and withdrawn and effeminated man, and so towards which she almost looks like a boss towards a employee or something. And also we see the other way around somehow, a macho type of men having these Barbie dolls full of whims and full of all kind of things. And the reversion of these roles somehow, like women try to either manipulate, like in the last example, through their tears, through their moods, through their approval, or even through their bodies, to manipulate the
options,
exactly, something like that, and to reach to something, to obtain something in relationship. And sometimes the other way around, very masculine type of women imposing to very confused and feminine type of men different things. And they all necessarily kind of move from a drama to another drama. In the case of the macho man with the Barbie doll, it's very flamboyant dramas the entire neighborhood hears about. In the case of the other, maybe it's just very painful breaking ups and traumas, and then people deciding, oh, I better stay alone than to go through that again. Or even the appearance of this idea, I would never find a man to match my, I don't know what, or never find a woman to...
We hear it a lot, especially from the side of women. statistically speaking, they are complaining they cannot find the man which can
Hold
polarize
them.
hold them, polarize them, and so on. It's interesting that men are not complaining that much that they cannot find a woman who can contain them, who can be with them, even though they are constantly searching. They are more quiet searchers, researchers than the women. But despite that, it is this misunderstood, very often, role that polarity and the masculine feminine game is playing very actively in our relationship. That's why we see these types, because we always search, as I mentioned, for something that complements us. But of course, according to our transformation, then we will shift the perspective. I've seen couples, by the way, and you know them, because we had them in our classes, couples which came like exactly as you mentioned, the macho with Barbie doll. But actually, Barbie doll became a very beautiful, responsible woman, not mother of a child necessarily, but motherly and wisely advising even people around. And he, from a macho man, became a hero. Because practically these are shadows of a person that evolve. And we've seen the transformation, and then they are still matching, but they transform into a very beautiful polar attractiveness there. But in the beginning, they were like this kind of, let's say, a little bit a caricaturistic representation of the yin and yang. Not the real yin and yang, but kind of this cartoonish type of representation. And yes, it is normal that it is like that, because that's where we are. We live in a cartoon kind of life most of the time, because we don't develop much of the nuances. So everything is simplified like in a cartoon. But on the other hand, through a process of transformation of each of the lovers, as you also mentioned, then the macho, for instance, becomes a superhero, and not the superhero in Marvel style, but real superhero, and the Barbie doll becomes perhaps a super initiating woman, a very wise goddess. Yeah. So this is but again, this is a process of transformation. And if they follow this path of transformation, interestingly, the hero matched the goddess perfectly then. So practically what they will experience, if you ask them, we started like that. We were two cartoon characters, and we became two heroes of life. But all the way through this process, what transformed in us was the relationship. They will witness that. They will see, yes, in the beginning we were proving each other. She would manipulate him with tears. He will manipulate her with his conditions and his aggressiveness and masculinity that is imposing. Then slowly, compassion sneaked in. Real eros started to practice continence, this amorous continence, which is transforming so much. And in the end, they become a marvelous couple, not a Marvel couple, a marvelous couple of real life heroes, so to speak. So yeah, this is we see this kind of typologies that are a little bit caricaturistic, cartoonish, but in fact they reflect this very precise, always the game of polarity. We always attract a match for us. We're always attracted by the match. But it's true, sometimes we are also cartoon character, and then we will attract also the same kind of match to us. But then through transformation, their relationship transform, as well as the two, of course, people involved.
And in the end, I have a last question. all this knowledge is so like valuable and so deep, and it's a lifetime experience somehow. How one can inspire like the very young generation? I'm just considering that we have, and many of our friends nowadays have these children among the puberty level, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, who are just coming up in life knowing nothing and having very like disturbed or twisted sources of information. The soap operas or the romantic dramas of Hollywood and so on, with the happily ever after dream, which is never like that, because it looks like the most difficult part is to find your Romeo, but in reality, nobody said what Romeo and Juliet would have done the next 50 years of their lives. Luckily, they died young, as we used to say. So, for such...
The happily ever after lasted 3 years.
How to... First of all, where they can find such valuable information, and second, how parents of them, or who would educate these youngsters in that?
Well, hopefully such a talk will open a lot of doors to a lot of souls. Hopefully people will start to dare to look into these aspects. The examples that we can provide, even our own example, we've been for 3 decades in this journey together and have been successfully passing these many tests that are awaiting any couple on the path, have been discovering and being guided by our spiritual guide to discover all these keys, hopefully will help lots of people to also get a little more educated in this extremely important chapter on couple relationships. The erotic podcasts perhaps will help other people. The incoming course that we were planning for years already about couple relationships. I mean, all these things are, yes, this will help the new generations to get started in life with a very good knowledge, because that is extremely important.
I also want to insist that removing the ignorance is very, very important. And a little bit my discouragement is, it looks like the very, very young generation, these 15, 16, 17s, they don't have love for learning somehow.
No, I think they have it placed in a different way, and they're waiting for new ways of learning. No, each generation brings a new way of learning. We brought with us a new way of learning. We brought with us the learning from computers. Our parents were learning from printed books. We learned already from computers. We brought with us a new hybrid way of existence, but they push it forward. They are having an appetite for crisis. This is the generation of crisis now. They grow up with dramas. They expose their life on internet, on Instagram, or all kind of other things that we don't even know yet. They use already since they are toddlers. So practically, they express the human appetite for learning, but yet in a different way. And let's not forget, crisis is a way of learning in an accelerated way. So I think the appetite will grow more and more. The more this crisis is deepening, the more the young generations will start to look for some solutions, and they will create their own ways to grasp the knowledge, and hopefully they will stumble upon this podcast. They will stumble upon the Tantra course that exists now and already spread in 30 countries almost, and in the Tantra course they will find that there are tens of lessons, full lessons about the mysteries of the couple relationship, a treasure that doesn't exist, that didn't existed yet on the planet, and now it exists, and so on, so forth. They will discover Grieg's book, The Tantric Path of Love, which is a book about the couple relationships and how to be in a harmonious way in a couple relationship, and so on. So they will start to grasp, but my intuition is that the new generations are searching for their ways to grasp the knowledge. We just have to provide it, and they will take it when when they have created enough drama. Good. Thank you very much for joining me again in this, not only in life, that's another thing to thank you forever, but also in this attempt to make some subjects available to the large audience, some subjects that usually we teach behind the doors of our classes and of our seminars and workshops, with this attempt to get out, to speak about these fundamental, after all, aspects of our life, to share the secrets of the initiates at the level where everybody can relate and understand. Thank you for this amazing talk, and please feel free and welcome again on other topics. And for everyone, stay tuned. Please write your comments, your questions below, and I'll be very happy to answer. And do not forget that being alive means to continuously transform. Thank you.
Thank you, Abba. It's been, like always, a great joy and happiness.
Thank you for listening to the Continuous Transformation Podcast. For more episodes, articles, and events, visit advaitananda.com.